Helen Rebello, it is so good to connect with you once again.
Likewise. Very, very lovely to be here. Thank you.
Well, I have been watching you on social media and getting the emails, and I'm so excited for you with the Magical Unfolding campaign to bring your book to the world. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been unexpected in terms of the level of interest and support and just belief that I've had reflected back at me. So yeah, thank you. I'm blown away by it, truly.
I know you are. You're genuinely like, whoa. And you know, one of the things that I think is funny, Helen, is that we as creative types, we get some sort of inspiration, or as spiritual types, we get like a download and we feel like, yeah, this feels good. This feels right. I'm going to run with it. And then our own little ego mind kind of steps in and we second guess. Well, okay, let me speak for myself. I would tend to second guess or doubt or feel like, oh, it's not quite perfect yet, or there's already so many other things like this in the marketplace. And I've, in the past, just sat on some of my ideas, especially books. And I've got one in process right now. So how has it been for you to finally hear? It's like, as you're saying, you're getting like this confirmation from the rest of the world that what you felt inside and thought was a good idea, you're actually getting confirmation that, oh, the world wants this.
Yeah, it's amazing because funnily enough, I actually don't sit on a lot of ideas. You know, I've created online programs and just run with it, and actually found out that sometimes it's not really what people want. But there was something about writing, I think, because it's so precious to me. You know, it's like my my thing that I guard for myself almost, and it's my form of communicating with myself as well. It's my kind of form of getting out of my head and into my heart and just splurging onto a page. And although I've done that, you know, in blog posts and things over the years, I sort of actually let it dry up a little bit because I felt like I needed to be private with it. So, yeah, it's really funny. It's really funny how we can be expressive in one way, but not in another way. And then, I don't know, something shifted. The reason behind it became so much more important than my own stuff around it. And so to be putting it out there into the world and seeing the reception, it is magical.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
all I can say. It's reaffirming. It's like it's food for the soul, and it just reminds me how important it is really to trust in what we know and what we feel we're here to share. And I'm really glad that I didn't wait any longer.
Yeah. Well, it has been unfolding magically. So for those of you listening who are curious, we're talking about Helen Rebello's new book project that's called The Magical Unfolding. And if you'd like to pre-order a copy and support the campaign, you can visit publishizer.com/the-magical-unfolding. And the link will be in the description for this show. Well, one of the things that you've said, Helen, that so really resonates with me, we both have this background in traditional healthcare and body therapy, but you said something about that each of us really has a divine right to live our lives as fully as possible, which means that we have to optimize our available energy, free up our bodies, and enhance our system functioning. And with your background, doing psychotherapy and previously doing the body stuff, what do you think is the biggest obstacle for people really optimizing their energy and freeing up their body? Because, it's such a critical part of living full.
Yeah, I mean, there are many things, but I guess the first thing that comes into my mind is probably that it's quite hard for people to develop an understanding of all the things that impact upon their energy, and to understand how much power they have over their own ability to maximize their energy and free up their system in all senses, create freedom in their heads and their life and their bodies, and, kind of create space in life. I think we, because we are in the Western world, we don't have a full appreciation of how, of just how many things we can do to really reset ourselves and reboot and recharge. And I have a thing about alliteration.
Yes.
all the R words.
Yeah, I use that as a mantra sometimes. As I'm doing kind of breath work or qigong, I'll repeat it's also a root syllable, Shri, 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 but I can turn it into re, and just think of, replenishing, relaxing, releasing, rebooting. So what are your, now that you're in this process of working towards this book release and, building up a new branded website and a whole, you're doing all of it. And you have to manage your energy as well, starting to do interviews, you're being more visible. What's your best way to kind of recharge and reboot?
I love this question. Because right now you're looking at somebody who's been up since 4:30 this morning, as I said to you before we started recording, and I'm definitely putting my energy out there in ways that can deplete me if I'm not careful. So like being online a lot more than normal can really deplete my energy. So one of the things I really make sure I do if I can't get enough sleep, for example, is I, without fail, will always make time for some meditation every single day, even if it's only 5 minutes. Focusing on my breathing and I don't know, it's if you spend just a few minutes doing something as simple as that, it can give you back tenfold the time that you spend doing it. And that's something I learned when I trained in restorative yoga, particularly how powerful one restorative yoga pose was. Even if you only held it for 10 minutes, it's like having 2 hours of deep rest. So it's just that anything that you can do to take your system, your nervous system, into that really sort of relaxed rest and digest state that we go into after we've eaten when we feel tired, rather than the sort of frenetic pushing energy. So I do that. And I make sure that I listen to my body. So, if I think my energy's getting a bit scattered or I can't really focus, I'm really good at putting on what I call the horsey blinkers.
Yeah.
So I become mono-focused, so all the distractions go off, all the notifications go off, all the pings go off. And then if I really need to, I'll just move my body and walk around and go outside and ground. In fact, I did it before we met today because I knew that I was running on empty a little bit because I didn't sleep so well. I also have really powerful superfood smoothies every day, but that's a whole other subject.
Ah, you do. So
they help a lot. Yeah. Very pure, alkaline, super nutrient rich.
Awesome. Yes, we definitely need to talk about that. I want your recipe so I can blend up my own. Well, I think one of the other things that you've talked about is, my story and how I believe that denying my soul its true expression, that denied expression led me to depression. And I know you've developed a lot of insights, but I'm curious about what was your biggest aha moment after working, a decade with women who felt stuck in various aspects of their lives.
Yeah. So I think the biggest insight for me, given that I learned, like you, I learned Chinese medicine, was seeing just how much physical symptoms correlate with with life conditions or life situations. So, for example, I worked with a lady, I'm going to call her Mary. I don't want to give her real name. But when she first came to me, she had problems with her vision, actually a medically diagnosed condition. And she had all kinds of chronic stress in her joints, so sort of arthritic-y joints and lots of stiffness. She was living in a marriage that she was very unhappy with, but didn't want to leave her partner because he was poorly. She was working in a really, really stressful job, dealing with kids, going through trauma, and at the same time she was grieving the loss of a friend. So she came to me because she just felt like life was completely lacking in depth, in feeling, in joy. She was stuck. She didn't know what on earth to do. And then she had this eyesight problem as well. Yeah. And of course she thought it was all very, very just physical manifestation. I was her last straw. She didn't know what else to do. And that's often what used to happen with me when people came to me. They tried everything else. So really for her, I recognized that, like, her, in Chinese medicine, grief especially is related to the lungs. And she wasn't breathing. She wasn't in her body. And so she wasn't breathing fully, and therefore she wasn't energizing her body fully. And she was very in her head. She wasn't down in her physical body. And, I just got her back into her body, and I taught her techniques to breathe fully and breathe slowly and feel her limbs and, really feel the back of her body, really reconnect to her whole system. And I taught her methods to access peace. At the touch of a button, I have this special technique that I quite often use for people, which I'll put in the book, of course. But yeah, so over the period of time, she suddenly realized that her eyes were getting clearer. She had a lot of headaches as well, and they all started to shift. The kind of joint stuff all started to shift. So she suddenly had confidence again in her body, and she'd written herself off in terms of her physicality. She was actually a very slim, quite fit-looking woman, but in her head she was old and incapable, and I think she was late 40s at the time. And she ended up having enough reconnection with herself to really start tuning into what she wanted. And over time she started taking ownership of that, and she started putting big changes in place, and she walked away from her job. She did eventually leave her partner. She found the courage to do that, and she retrained, and she now has a burgeoning new career, a new partner. She's incredibly fulfilled and happy. She has none of those physical symptoms that she came to me with. And so yeah, that's a long way of saying that my biggest aha moment was how phenomenally clever our bodies are, and how many physical symptoms they send us when energetically or emotionally or psychologically our lives are not right. They are misaligned. We get these signals from our body of disharmony,
absolutely,
dis-ease, and the Chinese were so clever, weren't they?
So observant to, catalog it all. But it's interesting that the way that you're putting it, because most of our patients or clients wouldn't see those connections. Like you said, she just figured these aches, these pains, the vision problems, they were all sort of unrelated physical ailments. But getting back in tune with the body and, again, focusing our own energy and attention on ourselves, starting with the breath, can be profound. It brings to mind one of my clients who expressed to me that before I used to put in the acupuncture needles, we did this special ear protocol. I'm sure you know of it, the auriculotherapy protocol that's really used for drug and alcohol detox, but I was using it in my clinic for relaxation, for depression, and helping people prepare for their therapy session. So as I would put in the needles, I would ask them to take these 5 deep cleansing breaths and start to just breathe regularly, very deep and slow, in and out, just sort of like the waves of the ocean. And she told me, she was like, I grew up with a mom who didn't like to hear us sigh. So that kind of breath. So she said, so when you tell me to like exhale, it triggers these memories of, oh, I'm not allowed to do that, because her mom like associated it with being irritable or whatever. And she said it took her a long time to trust that she could breathe. So it's interesting that you say that, your client wasn't exactly breathing fully. And it's interesting because after this woman learned to breathe, and she learned, many other things, exactly what you're talking about, like tuning into the body and what are these feelings or symptoms or even just simple aches and pains mean. And it was crazy because she called me up one day. This was years after she had finished our program. And she said, you know what? There's something going on in my tummy. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? She said, well, you taught me to trust my body and trust the sensations. She said, so I called up the gastroenterologist, her GI doctor, and said, I think there's something in there. And she went for what, the doctor was like, well, yeah, you're at the age, you can come in, we'll do a scope. It's, colonoscopy would be routine and normal at her age. And sure enough, they found a polyp that looked like it could have been cancerous. She had it removed. Fortunately, they caught it early. And she said, if I hadn't learned to trust my body, to tune into it, to actually give myself that attention, she says, who knows if that would have turned into a really terrible cancer. So what you're talking about is, people think it's simple when we say, oh, we want you to breathe, but it can be incredibly profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're breathing life into areas that are kind of stuck and stagnant and not moving. And, we're made of cells, aren't we? And they need oxygen and they need movement. Anything that isn't moving is no longer alive. So it's
stagnating. Exactly.
It's stagnating. Yeah. But at the same time, you've got to be really careful how you share this information and how you express it, because then there's the danger that people can start to feel like they're to blame for their thing. And, so it's a tricky balance, but it's phenomenal. I've lost count of the amount of people I've worked with that have been grieving. Bizarrely, I've had a lot of people to work with that have been grieving, and they all present with lung conditions in one way or another. And yeah,
the beauty
because
and
we're
elegance.
kind of holding our breath.
Exactly. The beauty and the elegance of the Chinese system that teaches us how to listen to the body and all these signs and symptoms. Well, there's one thing that you mentioned just a second ago, Helen, about teaching your client how to tap into peace. And I really would like for us to pick it up from there when we get back from the break, because I think this idea that when we're busy caring for a partner or a family member who's sick and dealing with our own physical issues and staying in our head, the idea of connecting to peace and purpose can seem really esoteric and out there. So I'd love it if you could help us ground it and talk to us about how that shows up in real life.
Sure. Love to.
Tune in daily to get fired up with insight and inspiration for purposeful living, conscious relationships, and soulful success. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check out the live version of this show, where I answer your questions in real time. Visit facebook.com/Dr. Andrea Pennington. My special guest today is Helen Rebello, the author of the forthcoming book, The Magical Unfolding. And when you hear Helen and I talking about Chinese medicine and acupuncture and energy, it all sounds a little out there, right? And especially when we start talking about living with purpose or connecting to peace. So Helen, I asked you before the break if we could sort of ground this for people and tell me, how does this concept actually transform your life in real terms?
Yeah, sure. So it might be helpful if I share this with a story from someone that I've worked with.
Absolutely, sure.
Because I guess that's the easiest thing for people to relate to, isn't it?
Yeah.
So essentially, when we are lacking peace and purpose in our lives, what tends to happen is that we will get to a stage in our life where, I don't know, it's like we will wake up one day and there'll be a little glimpse. It's like the curtain is lifted, and there'll be a little glimpse of the other world you think you could have that you're absolutely not in any way living. And a lot of people I work with come to me having had this moment of, I don't feel right. I've got all the stuff. I've collected the accolades. I've got my degree. I've got married. I've either had kids or not had kids, whatever it might be. I'm in my 40s, 50s, and yet I feel empty. And I feel like I'm being different things to different people. And like, if someone was to ask me what I wanted, what means something to me, what I want, especially, I would have no clue what the answer is.
Yeah.
And usually when people say that to me, it's because they have no idea what it is like to be at peace within themselves. It's usually because they have spent their entire lives looking outwards, looking after everybody else other than themselves. So my lovely client, who I'm going to call Annette just to protect her confidentiality, but she's been the most amazing soul to work with, because when she came to me, she was in her 50s, an only child, and from the north of England, where, as I know, because I was born up there, we don't really express ourselves. We cover everything up with humour, and we very much learn not to feel our feelings. And we certainly don't express anything about what we might want or desire. And she was of a generation a bit older than me, but still the same kind of mindset that in order to be regarded as being successful in life, you have to have chased certain things or achieved certain things. And it had left her, just like I said, just feeling like she was almost an imposter in her own skin, and she just didn't know what she wanted. And so she found herself, she'd lost both her parents, and she saw something in me and she wanted it for herself. That's kind of how it happened. She said, I want to be able to peel off the layers. So she had enough awareness to know that's what she wanted. And again, with her, it was a question of getting her out of her head and into her body. So this was a woman who'd got to her 50s and didn't know really how to hug anybody. Bless her, you'd go to hug her and she'd tighten up. So she was so enclosed and encased in her own body and this kind of busy, very clever head that she'd lost all connection with any sense of peace, purpose, what she was about, who she was. And so, I just got her out of her head into her body and got her to breathe the same very powerful stuff. But for her, I knew that one of the biggest things I could do was to transform her relationship to the busyness in her head. So with her, I really focused on grounding and reconnecting her back into a sense of the earth and a sense of the bigger space around her. And because I recognize that when you give somebody's system permission to focus into a bigger space. It just changes people's relationship to their physical body.
Yeah. So you mean rather than staying in one's head, you're saying relating to a bigger space, like bigger, like the whole earth, or what do you mean?
No, I mean, in her case, that would have been too weird. So for her, I was just getting her to think, just think about the space in the room. Because I've got to work with her one-to-one in person, which is really valuable sometimes. And, I got her to think about, I had her on a treatment table. So I got her to think about the table underneath her. And then I got to think about the table legs. And, I just took it slowly bit by bit so that all she's doing is expanding her awareness. Nothing's really shifting. It's just that she's playing with, instead of being really focused in here, starting to be focused more outside herself. And then something happens. We start to access this sense of peace that's actually always there. And it's a bit like tuning a radio. Yeah. Turning a radio dial so that we're just becoming aware of something that was there all along. It's just that we'd got stuck on a frequency. So we can only hear one station, and that's the noisy station. That's basically going, who am I? I must look after everyone else. And so she got really good at finding peace. She got so addicted to this sense of, wow, when I feel peaceful, I'm accessing stuff I've never ever known in my life. And again, it just over actually a relatively short period of time, it transformed her relationship to herself, and it transformed her ability to receive back from other people. There wasn't that same need to keep giving. She was able to receive as well. And she was somebody who very much needed notes on everything. She needed details.
But that makes sense. If you think of, you don't have to just be from the north of England to be sort of closed off and always kind of checking to make sure that you're following the norms. But I would imagine that if you get to your 50s and you've never really been allowed to reach out, express, feel, receive, it sounds weird, but yeah, we do need like instructions or prompts on, okay, I'm going to allow people into my space, or I'm going to extend myself into the outer space of me. How do you do that? It sounds silly, but absolutely, I can totally imagine that you would need kind of step-by-step guidance.
Yeah. So that's what I did. That's what I gave her. I gave her stuff to work with, But I knew that things had shifted phenomenally for her when I actually saw her talk at an event that I spoke at as well.
Really?
And for the first time ever, she was, she had no notes. She was unscripted, and she'd never done that before. And now she's into yoga, she's into meditation. She keeps sending me messages saying, you're not going to believe it, but I'm wearing bracelets now. And she loves her singing, and she's writing a book about her story. Oh, wow. She is expressing herself, and she's finding so much joy. And actually, she's almost let go of a desire to have all the answers and to have to fully know what her purpose is. She's happy to just accept that for now, her purpose is as simple as her learning to come back to who she kind of came here to be.
I love that. I love that concept. And in fact, when we get back from the break, I want to expand on that, because I think we do, especially as women, and, we get to this point where we feel like, I have to know, what is my purpose? What am I here for? If I'm not living for something, what am I doing? And maybe I'm going to fall behind. So I'd love it if we could pick it up from there and really talk about accepting the fact that sometimes your purpose is just to be. And we don't always have to be in that striving or achieving stage. But anyway, when we get back, can we talk about that?
Yes, we can.
I'd love it. Great. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. check me out on Instagram at Dr. Andrea Pennington. And now, back to the show. You've probably heard me talk about my desire for you to live with passion and purpose. But what does that really mean? Like, does it mean that you have to have some big goal, like starting a company or writing a book or creating a charity? Well, not necessarily. And today's guest, Helen Rebello, is going to expand on this idea of why it is important to live with purpose, but how we can find purpose even in the in-between moments. So Helen, as we were going into the break, you were talking about this client of yours who found that it was okay, that she didn't have all the answers and her purpose was just to be in that in-between.
Yeah. And I think I love talking about this because there is this myth, we spend our lives trying to get to grips with who we are and like psychometric tests are so popular, aren't they?
Yes. I recommend a lot of them myself.
Yeah. And my husband works, he's trained in one of them as well. And they are brilliant. But, sometimes I think it's a really good thing to remember that purpose can just be as simple as doing things intentionally and knowing why you're doing them. Sometimes purpose doesn't have to be this concept of needing one thing that you came here to do. How about we kind of think about playing with a reframe of purpose as being just about giving yourself permission to be you and do that unapologetically, as you mentioned earlier. And what if we were here to just be who we are, underneath the layers?
Exactly. Well, that's, the concept of my next book. But, you've heard me say this a number of times, and I said it in the TED Talk that when I was teaching at the University of Monaco, the name of the course was Become Who You Are. And as I had the students research, where did this quote come from? Why do people always talk about it? And when you go back to this Stoic philosopher, Pindar, everyone always thinks it's Friedrich Nietzsche because he got famous for it, but it really came from Pindar, who said that you need to be such as you are, having learned what that is. And so Aristotle took it and ran with it. And he said, look, the aim of life is for us to figure out who we are. Like he literally said, that's your purpose. What you do along the way, all these things that we might become, the end point is really about discovering who we are. So I love that you say it like that, because yes, the doingness of purpose, whether that's, I don't know, caring for our children or writing a book or whatever it is, that's important. For some of us, that gives us a sense of peace and gratification. But this idea that if we just let go with the idea of striving to get, achieve, or do, and instead recognize that maybe the philosophers, okay, maybe they're not right, but let's just try it on for size.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what our purpose is like you say, to just be you, underneath all of those layers, all of those roles.
Yeah, because when all the stuff that we search for, or that we think we need to find, when all of that is stripped away, you're left with yourself.
Yes.
And I learned this relatively late, when I found myself, I've told this story before, but I found myself in the Sri Lankan jungle. I didn't find myself there. I intentionally went there, but I thought I was going there to recover from a hysterectomy that I had at age 42. It was 11 weeks after my surgery, and I was very lost, very broken, in a lot of pain. And having a hysterectomy, people hear that and they're just like, yeah, like women have hysterectomies. But women who've spent 10 years wanting children and been through miscarriages
Wow.
and God knows what else, when they have to have a hysterectomy, it marks a massive end point. And I had to do a lot of work to make peace with that. With all my knowledge, I got every bit of help I could possibly get. But I still got to Sri Lanka for this yoga retreat. And all I actually was left with was this space where lots of stillness and peace was encouraged. And I didn't really want it because I didn't want to be left alone with my head. But that's, of course, what I needed. And I'd reached this point where I realized that at the crux of the pain around the hysterectomy was, who am I as a woman if I can't have children? And who am I as a wife to my husband if I can't give him children? And now I find it kind of ridiculous that I thought that, because it just seems silly. But I we're brought up to believe that without that, who are we? Who am I as a woman? And that's what really started me digging into my purpose and what I was here for. And I had this phenomenal moment in the jungle where my very wise yoga teacher, Helen Noakes, she's intuitive enough to know that I needed to just stand in Tadasana, yoga standing posture, and ground and connect my feet to the ground and my head to the sky, and just look out at the jungle in front of me and just stand there until I could kind of feel my body again, because I'd lost connection with my body. And as I stood there, I saw this interconnecting mesh, connecting everything, like connecting the trees. It wasn't dew, it was an energetic matrix. That's the only way I can describe it. Wow. And suddenly I just had this sense of everything's okay. You can let go. Just trust. You're part of something so much bigger. You don't have to chase anything. You don't have to be anything. You're fine just to be in your process, be in your stuff. Let go of needing to define it, and just be at peace with your process, where you are. And I know that probably sounds a lot easier than it was, because we have time limitations, but it was a profound moment.
Oh, I can feel it. I mean, I can see it and feel it, like that realization that must have come to you that, wow, I am a part of life. Like all of the heady definitions and identity that we tried to grab onto is not even connected sometimes to reality. Like I could just see you as a part of that jungle and that matrix. It's like you realize, wow, I'm not separate from it. I don't know. That's just what came to mind for me.
No, you're right. Absolutely. And so, I guess one of the reasons I'm so passionate about purpose is, for me, I feel like so many people go chasing it, or they just get to a stage that I got to anyway in life. It's sort of an inevitable thing that happens, I think, because people put themselves into whatever they're focused on, be it their children or whatever it is. And I got lucky in a way, because I got to experience that earlier in life, and I got to connect with the fact that, for me, living in a way that's true to who you are, and just showing up, having the courage to let go of the layers we acquire through life, and just trust that you'll be okay. It sets you free, really.
It does. And it reminds me of this question, like, without your title, who are you? So when people say, oh, I'm the CEO of this, or I'm so-and-so's mother, or I'm so-and-so's wife, if you took away all of these titles or definitions, these things that one could get fixed on, strip all that away, who are you? And as I was, again, seeing this vision of you seeing trees in the jungle, and I think about when I look at the jungle or a forest, and you see all these trees, like they all find their way to get their sunlight, and one may have, weird shaped branches, and one may be missing some. But would you ever look at a tree and say, oh, you're missing some leaves and some branches there. You're not a tree.
Exactly.
You're not a full, whole, healthy tree. And yet we do that if we're missing some branch or some layer or some, title, right?
Yeah. And it's so much worse now because we've got all this input and access to looking into other people's lives if we subscribe to that, which clearly
social media, we can compare ourselves to not just celebrities, but people we don't even know. And we think that, their life is so much more fabulous than mine.
Yeah. And I think both you and I would agree, we've made a lot of realizations. We do some powerful work, but not for any moment would either of us sit here and say, we've got it all sorted and everything flows smoothly.
Absolutely not.
Because it doesn't. It's about being able to come back to your core center and know who you are despite the sort of toing and froing and the swaying of life.
Well, one of the other things that you always say, Helen, and I love it because, again, it puts us into an openness, is you say that we need to just be curious, like greet the day with curiosity, which I love because most of us do feel like we have to have a list of things that we have to get done and we've got to be focused and, productive. But what if we just let some of that go? Or in addition to having your to-do list, you also opened up a space for curiosity. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I love curiosity because I think curiosity connects you in with your child-like self. Mm-hmm. And I think you can probably relate to this. We're all essentially children underneath the grown-up mask and the grown-up body, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think children see a lot more than we do, and they're very wise souls, a lot of them. And there's just being curious opens you up to receive more. If you haven't already decided how your day will look or how things are meant to be, you're much more open to things that might come your way, opportunities that might come your way. And you're less attached to outcomes if you don't achieve all the things on your tick list. And don't get me wrong, I have my 3 most important tasks every day, and I don't always get them done. But it kind of opens up your energy. It takes a lot of the pressure off, and it releases stress from your system when you're prepared to be more openly curious about things and open to possibility. It's just a much more expansive space.
I get the feeling, but I wonder, how do you make it practical? So for example, I remember waking up last week thinking, wait a minute, what am I supposed to focus on today? Like, I knew I had a mountain of things. And so I got into my head realizing, okay, Andrea, you have so much to do. You're just going to have to prioritize each day of the week. And I woke up thinking, oh, wait, I don't know what the focus is for this day. And so I'm wondering, in a moment like that, when we are in that headspace of anxiety, like wanting an answer, how do you get to that place of curiosity?
In the simplest way possible, I would probably just let it go and give yourself permission just to drop your attention into how your feet feel on the ground. Just do something really, really simple so that you're shifting your energy out of your head, because your energy goes where your attention goes. So, I quite often get people just to feel their feet in their shoes, or if they haven't got shoes, feel the carpet under your toes. And it's a very practical thing that anyone can play with and anyone can learn to do in a blink of an eye, because I taught my mum and she couldn't do it. It was a really weird concept, but it took her a day, and then she had it, and now she uses it every day. And it just takes you out of your head and out of that need to tick the boxes, and then it just shifts your energy. And it just takes you out of that kind of sense of needing to grasp onto the right thing. And because you've just taken your energy away, it's then much easier to come back in and focus on what actually is going to move you forward, or what is most important for you that day.
Yeah,
because we do all have stuff we need to do, but
yeah, that's actually helpful, because the idea of the spaciousness that we talk about, that space for curiosity, the space that allows something from the universe or to come into our awareness. If we're too busy in the head trying to think, what was it? What am I supposed to do? Wait, is it this? Is it that? And instead just grounding, that creates, I'm being very visual, but that creates space.
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, I talk about energy, and it can be a bit esoteric maybe sometimes, but anybody watching this can just try thinking into their feet, and suddenly they're aware of their feet in a way they weren't before they did it. And it shifts your energy, and it just clears your head. It's so easy. So sometimes it's the simplest stuff, actually, isn't it? It's like, if you hear a loud noise, it totally takes your attention away, and suddenly you've lost track of what you're doing. It's no different. It's just that we're talking about it in an energy sense.
Right. And it's giving us the conscious awareness that we can shift. We can shift our energy. We can shift your attention, if you like, if that's, more accessible for people. I love it. Well, Helen, it's always fun to talk to you. I love how we get to go deep. As you know, that's my preferred MO in life. So I want to thank you again for spending some time with me on the show. And I am looking forward to the next couple of weeks, because basically the campaign will be at its end. You'll have to choose a publisher, and then the book will be, on its way to its, birthing process, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very exciting. It is exciting. Well, you'll have to come back and talk to us about that piece of the pie, because I think the journey that we go through as writers, especially as you shared in one of our previous interviews, where that's what you really wanted to do, and then you denied yourself doing that for so many years, and now you get to do it, and the world is like greeting you with open arms saying, yes, yes, yes. So I'd love to hear the next piece of that journey when we get together again. Yeah, I'd love to as well. Conversation worth having. All right. Well, folks, you can find out more about the lovely Helen Rebello by visiting thetranquilpath.co.uk. And of course, the links are in the description of this show. And you can find out what's going on with the Publishizer campaign to bring her book to the world as well. So Helen Rebello, thank you once again for being here. Thank you. And my friends listening and watching, just remember that you truly are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on Twitter @Dr. Andrea. And did you know I'm on the radio daily? Visit AmericaOutloud.com to download the Talk Radio app.